Welcome to the second of our Social Enterprise Forum series this evening. My name is Ian Jones. I'm the Project Coordinator for RMIT SEEDS, the Social and Environmental Enterprise Development section of the Social Enterprise Group at RMIT University. It's a very interesting time to live in the social enterprise and social innovation space in Australia. We're currently bearing witness to a global shift in the way that services are delivered in the way we address some of our most pressing social problems. The shift itself has been slowly occurring for some time now, and for those that follow the sector, you'll have noticed that the government has started to invest in the Social Enterprise Development Investment Fund. We've seen continued growth and interest in Social Traders, the Crunch program, which disperses $1 million every year into new and growing social enterprises. And in the last couple of years, we've seen Taxi emerge in Adelaide with continued demand for its programs, and also SEWA, the Social Innovation in Western Australia Fund. Yet, with all of this progress, when people come back from markets around the world, Australia is still considered risk averse as a nation relating to its investment in the social enterprise sector. But tonight's not about raising the question as why we haven't directed more money into this area, or why we haven't moved quicker to change legal structures to make investment into new model social enterprises easier, even though other Western nations have already started doing it. Tonight's not about continually having a discussion about what we can and can't do. It's about showing you the how, and it's about showing you the what has been done. In showcasing the best practice models drawn from enterprises serving areas such as the homeless of Australia, the underemployed in Australia, and catering to the base of the pyramid and those living in extreme poverty across Africa and Asia, we hopefully tonight would like to begin and continue this conversation. And it's a conversation we can continue with the knowledge that these organisations are a shining example of enterprises that can not only be built, they can be replicated and scaled for impact. And we hope that they too will become the norm of the future. Each of the speakers before you has undertaken their own individual journeys, their own ups and downs on their pathway to success. We hope that you enjoy our speakers tonight and that you're inspired to create the conversation, action, and together, the change. I'd now like to welcome your host for this evening, RMIT Social Entrepreneur in Residence, Mr. Daniel Almagor.
Thanks. Thanks, Ian. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming out, and thanks for coming to hear this conversation that we'll have about basically how do you find funding, investment in social enterprise. And in a moment I'll introduce the panellists, and what we'll go around is each one will be able to introduce their own businesses as well and tell you a bit of their story. But when I think about trying to raise capital for a social enterprise, there's one that's currently looking to raise capital that I thought is really setting a benchmark for being way out there. And I don't know if anyone's checked out, there's a guy who's currently in Melbourne sitting on a toilet seat with his pants down, committing to not get off that toilet seat until he raises $50,000. It's whogivesacrip.org, and they've got a webcam on him on the toilet, and he's been there for about 40 hours. So I don't know, I've been on the toilet for 20 minutes before my legs go to sleep, so I don't know how he's feeling. But that's commitment, and I think that's probably going to be a big part of the conversation tonight about how to find that money to start your enterprise. A quick sense of who's in the audience. If you don't mind, just put your hand up if you're a student. Great. Put your hand up if you're an investor, if you're with the money looking for somewhere for it to go. You realise their hands are like this. Yep. They're not, it's like, yeah. And entrepreneurs, people who have got an idea that you're working on. And of those entrepreneurs, keep your hand up if you're actually currently looking for money. Brilliant. You've all come to the right place.
When aren't they?
Sorry?
When isn't a social entrepreneur looking for money?
Yeah, that's right. We all are. All right, so our speakers tonight, we have Peter Ball on the end. Peter is basically his background is in finance, investment. Hopefully everyone's read this, but for those who haven't, I'll just give you a really brief background. In finance and investment, worked in the social enterprise space for quite a few years now, both trying to raise money and also working very much on the coalface of social enterprise, and has now come into this amazing new enterprise called Buffed, which is basically an incredible shoe shining franchise business, but we'll hear more about that in a minute. Rebecca Scott, who started life as a science educator, science clown almost, we could say.
I was the slime queen in a science circus.
So that's cool. If you're ever going to start a social enterprise, a good place to begin. And then worked in international development and overseas in Vietnam, where I think you found your social enterprise spark, and is now running a social enterprise called STREAT, which takes street kids off the street and trains them in hospitality and brings them into that workforce. And Liz Aitken, who also started with a finance background, accounting, but more so related to the energy industry. And I guess that's where you saw an opportunity, saw the light, if we can say,
Yes.
and got involved with Illumination,
Yeah.
which basically brings lighting, affordable lighting, to the poor and disadvantaged around the world, which is quite incredible. What I'll do is maybe we can go around and start with Peter, and 3 or 4 minutes, just a brief overview of Buffed, what it is, what it looks like, how big, the journey in 3 minutes.
Sure. So as Danny said, we are in the process of developing an organisation called Buffed. It's been auspiced by the Wise Foundation, which is a philanthropic private family foundation. We started the business started the conversation midway through last year, and we launched the business in November, and we launched with 2 sites. We essentially use those sites to look at the business model, look at shoe shining, where it sits, I guess to look at the, how we could improve it, both from an infrastructure point of view, from a people point of view, from a consumer retail point of view. Moving forward from there, we're now happy to say that as of about 3 hours ago, we opened our first site in Melbourne. So for all of you who want your shoes shined, you can now go to 530 Collins Street and get your shoe shine. Our focus really is, it is about building a network of shoe shine stands, but I guess the reason for doing it is to help individuals who are currently long-term unemployed or underemployed to, I guess, secure a future for themselves and for their families, but in a I guess a slightly unique way, in the sense that we're not giving them an opportunity with respect to employment. We're throwing them straight into the deep end as franchisees and therefore as small business owners. So our role is to develop a network of shoe shine stands, but that is significantly underpinned by, I guess, the ongoing professional and personal development of these individuals, so they can not only deliver the best shoe shine in town, but also can be sustainable small business people. And that's obviously no neat trick, but we've got 5 sites up and running now. We hope to, we will have in the next couple of weeks new sites open in Melbourne and also in Sydney, with the view that there's probably an opportunity in Australia to have 100, 150, maybe even 200 sites over the next couple of years, creating, I guess, opportunities for that many people. So.
Cool. Beck.
I run an organisation called STREAT, and we work with homeless young people between the age of 16 and 25, and we train them in hospitality. As you can imagine, a young person becomes homeless for a whole bunch of different reasons. It might be drug and alcohol issues, mental health. I always say to people, if the streets are better than being at home, kind of imagine what home must be like. So it's not quite as easy as just taking a bunch of young people and giving them some skills and then putting them in a cafe. We have to work on the primary reasons why those young people became homeless in the first place. So there's an enormous amount of kind of extra support, I guess, that we give our young people across the 6 months that they're with us. We now have 4 cafes around inner Melbourne and also a coffee roasting business. We're up to our 6th class of young people. They started 2 weeks ago now. And across that time, we've kind of learnt a lot, I guess, but we've also, just in this last 6 months, taken a fairly major expansion where we bought 2 cafes and a roasting business off another social enterprise, and we did that with social investment. So we've got 4 different other investors apart from ourselves, and that acquisition was made possible. So we're now kind of learning how to quickly scale. We were always set out to try and scale. We wanted to be able to have more and more young people that we could help. So we've now, I guess, got to a point where we're starting to do some acquisitions. We're now looking for our next businesses as well to start to look for more cafe sites as well. So we're aiming for complete financial sustainability by 2015, and I suspect that quite a bit more of that will happen through acquisition, fuelled essentially by social investment.
Cool. Hi. Liz Aitken. So I'm Director and CFO of an organisation called Illumination Solar. There are currently 1.8 billion people in the world who use kerosene for lighting, for just everyday use and needs, and they're the poorest people in the world. They currently have, let's see, about a third of their income of anything between $1 and $2 a day is being spent on kerosene. Lighting a small jar, Vegemite-sized jar, of kerosene in a house, in an enclosed space like a hut, it results in the entire family in that house inhaling the equivalent of 2 packets of cigarettes in a night. So the health hazards are insane. Lung disease is huge. Poverty is rife. Generally, it's a pretty noxious problem. So we've developed a solar light, and I happen to have one handy, of course. So here we are. So this product is called the Mandarin. This one's actually the Mandarin Ultra. And it is. It's the 2nd generation. The 3rd generation's on its way. So this, for 8 hours of charge during the day, you get 8 hours of light. It's hard to describe what the equivalent is in light bulb wattage because LEDs don't work quite the same way as watts do. But it's enough to certainly read by and to do all of your basic functions by, and it's certainly far brighter and better light than kerosene is. We sell these for the equivalent of between 6 and 8 weeks worth of kerosene. So there's a very short payback period for our end users and our customers. And we've sold in, well, since we started the business in late 2010, we have sold over 130,000 lights. That's abated about 65,000 tonnes of carbon. It's resulted in the households that we've sold to saving just under $31 million over a 3-year period. So over, if you're earning $1 a day, that's quite a lot of dollars, really, when you think about it, over a 3-year period. And we've actually changed the lives of over 500,000 people so far in our journey. We as a business had started it all off on a friends and family raise, which is always good fun. The type of business that we are is one that seems to fall through the cracks of every single type of grant funding and everything else. So we are funded by our shareholders, and we are a for-profit organisation. So we are ultimately looking at paying our shareholders a dividend, which I know is a novel concept for a social enterprise, but we're going to do it if it kills us. We should hit about $1 million in turnover, or we should hit our $1 million in turnover this quarter, fingers crossed. So we're pretty excited about the way things have been going, and we've now become self-sufficient in terms of monthly overheads and all that sort of stuff. So so we're madly growing as fast as we possibly can.
Cool. And I guess, we're here to talk about, raising funds. So let's start there. And hopefully what we have is a really open conversation about raising funds, because sometimes that's the hardest thing to actually get information about, because, you know, particularly in the private sector, these are things that you keep very quiet. And of course here we're trying to, you know, learn about this. So I'm interested to know, for Beck, your first, I guess the first money that you raised, where did it come from, and how did you get that?
Came from Denmark, from Danish philanthropists. I guess part of the challenge of building something that's scalable is you know that you need quite a lot of money, and you know that it's going to be quite a long time between kind of getting that money and being financially sustainable. So we knew that it was going to take us many years to get to that point, and that we would need to focus really hard on building for a number of years. So we needed the pot of money that we started with to be fairly large. And we met some Danish philanthropists in Vietnam, as it turned out, who got excited about what we were doing. They had never ever made a grant at all in social enterprise, but I think a combination of us being fairly passionate about what we were doing, but also them starting to realise that from a granting perspective, that they could start to leverage their dollar, you know, a lot higher. For every dollar that they gave us, we would hopefully be able to generate a bunch of dollars as well. So they funded our feasibility study here in Melbourne, and we then went and took the feasibility study to them in Copenhagen. And what was 45 minutes on their agenda of their board meeting to talk through the feasibility study became a 6-hour gruelling kind of conversation where everything else went off the agenda, and they just gruelled us for many, many, many hours about kind of every page of that document. And at the end of that 6 hours, we left, they left, and then we came back to Australia, and then about 2 months later we got a phone call, my partner and I, who are both the co-founders, so Kate and myself, got a phone call early one morning saying, we're giving you the startup funds, you're good to go. So that moment of just realisation that it was going to happen, but one of the things that we absolutely insisted on doing was not settling for too little. It was absolutely critical that we knew that we needed, you know, a decent sized chunk, and then if we went out too early, we would essentially end up just, you know, chasing our tails forever. So making sure that the chunk was big enough, and it was a big ask, you know, it was an enormous ask. It was, you know, over $700,000. So it was a huge amount of money by anyone's standard for, you know, two people who had never run a social enterprise before. So it was probably unlikely that we would have got that money, I think, in Melbourne at the time. But it certainly then set the path for us to be able to get on and just build flat out.
Right. But you, like, what you're saying is you had an idea, no money, and the first time you asked for money, you asked for like $750,000.
Yep.
It's a lesson to learn.
No, but I have to say,
cool.
But I have to say, the feasibility, it took us 2 years to make the ask.
Yeah.
So there were 2 years of self-funded work. I gave up my day job at the CSIRO, where I was on a, you know, fairly senior management salary. And so we worked really solidly for a couple of years to I guess kind of articulate what the organisation was, how it was going to work, and we rolled up our sleeves in someone else's enterprise for a couple of years. So we kind of got to feel how a social enterprise worked. So I guess in one sense we hadn't run our own, but we'd been highly entrepreneurial and built a whole bunch of projects and stuff beforehand. So we cut our teeth a lot, you know, in other people's organisations, really. So I guess we've been really entrepreneurial in a sense. And at the end of the day, they just said, look, the plan that you've brought to us is, you know, is so strong. We'd spent so much time kind of thinking about how the organisation would work. But they said at the end of the day, we're also backing you, you know, and there's clearly, you've got a couple of years of backing yourself. So you've got skin in the game. You know, that's, so many investors want to see that you're prepared to take the risk yourself and put some skin in the game. But also, I guess, in that, you know, they said passion kind of makes, you know, is the final tick that we want as well.
Yeah, no, you're right. And that's interesting because for you, Liz, it was a commercial enterprise. I mean, you didn't go in looking for grants.
No.
And I guess that common phrase, you know, it's family, friends and fools that really give you the money in the beginning.
If any of my shareholders are watching this, I love you. You're not
so
part of the fools.
which one was it for you? Or which of the three, or all three? How did you get your first bit of capital?
How did we do it? Look, it was a mixture of... we too had spent a considerable amount of time on the business plan and on shaping it up, getting everything together. And our first, if you like, our first proper project, we'd run sometime before that as our trial. So we had hard data and hard results, and we'd actually sold units in Tanzania and had collected the information, and were able to commence with the process of putting in submissions to the EU for our because we earn carbon credits from the EU. So, the commencing of that whole process. So we had quite a lot of stuff underway, and we had, oh dear, gosh, I'll look back at this as probably one of the worst times of my life, I think. On the smell of an oily rag, doing consultancy and contracting work, as well as trying to pull together all of the stuff that was needed for a business. So going through that process for a solid 6 months. And then pretty much just went out to family and friends and, sort of associates within Melbourne. Because both Shane's the CEO, and I have got a very strong, deep record in energy. We weren't straying too far away from our field of expertise. So, but in retrospect we were, because there's a hell of a lot of a big difference between selling electricity in Australia and selling solar lights in third world country. But we didn't tell our investors that at the time. So we thought it wasn't going to be that hard, or it wasn't the challenging bit. So,
I guess for everyone else, if you're comfortable sharing, what kind of quantum are we talking about here? Were you raising, a few thousand, or did you go the whole hog like that?
Well, I certainly didn't go quite as hard as STREAT did. We, in over 2 tranches, we've raised $375,000 in equity, and we're about to move to our next phase, which will be yet to be confirmed, but between $500,000 and $1 million, which is our first venture towards sort of more traditional VC style funding. So we'll get there, but nowhere near as much as 750,000. Would have loved it, but was never going to happen. Yeah. It was a far more modest beginning.
I think Beck, you've sort of set the benchmark there. Peter, what about you? I mean, your journey was a little bit different with Buft. You had experience beforehand raising money. Buft came in a bit of a different way, didn't it?
Yeah. So from a perspective of being involved in social enterprise, I'd been involved in using the investment banking background to build mortgage funds for the non-profit sector and property trusts and impact bonds for hospitals and all sorts of stuff. And I looked at Buft and talking with both Graham Wise and Alex McDonald about, I guess, the development of or the proposed business model that was there to be explored, if you like. And from a point of view of how we started, interestingly enough, we one of the first things we did was how do we want to do shoe shining? If we're going to build a scalable, sustainable social business model, is it about shining shoes, or is it about something completely different? So we looked at a whole lot of things, and we came back to shoe shining for all of the commercial reasons as opposed to the social reasons, and it was about time to market and how much money we need to build a shoe shine business, as by comparison to a whole range of other different businesses, been it landscaping or whatever, maintenance, cleaning, the whole lot. So we looked at it from a perspective that we knew we could deliver a model quickly, promptly, affordably. We knew we could train people to shine shoes. It's technically deliverable. So we looked at all of those sorts of things. Then we just decided, okay, well, let's go and write the business planning and all of that. At the time, obviously, we're all busy doing different things. So it was actually before I guess, officially came on board. And we actually went and spoke with UQ Business School and a group of their MBA students worked on the development of the business plan. So they went and did early stage market research and financial modelling and all the rest of it. which is, I guess, a great initiative for them, but achieved a good outcome for us because it wasn't, a capital outlay to go and do those sorts of things. So we then used that and went and tapped some corporate contacts that we had. And we were pretty fortunate, I guess, in a maybe similar way, in that the first door we went and knocked on was the Bank of Queensland. And at the time, David Liddy was the CEO, and we spoke to David, and he's got incredibly strong, I guess, conscience in respect to the social conscience. And so it didn't actually take too much convincing at all from in terms of looking at shoe. And I think you blend that with the fact that I've since also found out I think he's got quite a strong shoe fetish. But it essentially meant that it was a catalyst for us in the sense that we thought, well, if the first corporate we can talk to can commit to being involved for a 3-year period, and the lump sum, the amount of money is not significant by any stretch, and less than previously mentioned, well, then other 2 examples, but what it meant was it would sort of almost underwrote, if you like, also a commitment with respect to the Wise Foundation, in the sense that, if a corporate's going to write a cheque for a certain amount of money, then if we're going to auspice the development of this enterprise, we should absolutely be committing, at least that much. So that then, I guess, pointed us in a direction of saying, well, we know what we need, and the ongoing costs of the business were, pretty thoroughly and comprehensively mapped out, and it was then on with, building the business, if you like.
But I mean, even on that, Buffed, the whole point of Buffed is a franchise business. Mm-hmm. So again, raising capital for a franchisee is kind of a different way of looking at it again. How do you, I mean, do you guys raise the money for the franchisee to start the business, or are they responsible for their own, did you just have to start with the parent entity? How did that work?
Yeah, good question. And actually, I talked about before in terms of a lot of the looking at shoe shining and looking at how we were going to structure Buffed once we decided that shoe shining was what we were going to develop, if you like, was that we then said, well, we could just go and create, I guess, loose contracts with these individuals, a model, like The Big Issue, for example. There's contracts in place where they buy the magazine and for an amount, and then they sell it for an amount, and they keep the margin, obviously. And we looked at, that, and we looked at a whole range of other models, and we really wanted to, I guess, from our point of view, push that sort of innovation barrier, if you like, in the sense that we thought, well, how do we structure this in a way that really puts responsibility and accountability and all of that back on the individual? How do we, push them into a space of, I guess, being, going from being unemployed to being a small business owner, being uncomfortable and a disturbing sort of place, because I think therein lies the opportunity for enormous personal growth. But from a point of view of, I guess, looking at it commercially, as I touched on before, it also meant that as these guys, obviously, if we were going to own a network of 100, 150 shoe shines around the country, we would own all of the capital costs as well, or the infrastructure, and we would wear that. Whereas if we also looked at it and said, actually, the additional, I guess, benefit to a franchise is that the individuals acquire their own sites. For the first couple, we certainly weren't going to push them out the door and say, go and find your own finance. We fully financed our initial franchisees. We're just at the stage now where we're, I guess, finalising the conversation or the commercial partnership around how we have an intermediary relationship with an organisation who can fully finance our franchisees on fair terms. The entry cost is essentially, it's pretty low. $5,000 will be the max, and obviously the more we build of these, the lower we can make that entry price. So $5,000 over 2 years works out to about $40 a week for a franchisee. So that is pretty low ongoing commitment, particularly when all of the places that we go into are essentially rent-free. So if we've developed in a way that we certainly try and keep that cost down, and they then purchase that at a low cost, which also means that we're obviously getting, refunded for the infrastructure costs, the chairs, the materials, the uniforms, the training development, all the rest of it.
Obviously we're all trying to find money and to get our organisation started. And I think one of the big challenges is, of course, if you can find it, you feel overwhelmed with delight. Is it always good to just say yes to everything that comes your way? So I'm interested, Beck, I know, we've had this conversation in the past. When do you say no? What is a good investor? What is a bad investor?
It's quite hard to... it can be quite hard to stay firm to your principles if you're desperate. And so I would always recommend kind of thinking about that question way before you get desperate. Because the last thing that you want to do is kind of compromise a bunch of things that you kind of hold dear, I guess. One of the things, I guess, as the CEO of STREAT, I take as my personal kind of number one KPI is bringing about the most positive, impact for every mouthful that you have of our food or coffee. And it kind of makes sense then that our supply chain and where we get things from, but where we also get our investment from, is part of that equation. That the impact of the mouthfuls that you're having are impacted by all of the decisions we make at the back of STREAT that you often don't get to hear about, but are actually part of the impact that you're creating as well. And so it makes sense that if you're wanting to get money from a place, but there's, obviously impact that comes with, positive or negative, that comes with making money. So we, I guess, kind of, thought long and hard about, well, where would we accept money from? So we've said no 2 times to gambling money. A lot of the young people in our program, their lives have fallen apart because of gambling, and it just seems so hypocritical for us to say, yes, we'll take a whole bunch of gambling money on one hand, but knowing that that's been, the cause of so much problem for our young people. So I guess what we've done is we've done what... In ethical investment, I guess what you would say is there's kind of different ways that you can choose how you ethically invest your money. You can do a negative screen, so you can chop out all the nasties, of that investment. You can say no to things like tobacco or armaments, things that cause damage in making money. But you can also positive screen when you do an ethical investment. You can say, what are the types of things that I'd like to invest in? What's the stuff that I'm passionate about? So you might invest your money in, a portfolio with health or education or things that you see as doing, positive social impact. I guess we took a similar approach and said, let's try and get our investment from places that are bringing about positive social impact. So we did our own, I guess you would call it positive screen on our investors. So we said, let's try and find like-minded people that share the kind of values that we share and want to bring about social change with their money. There was a time, I kind of laugh about it now, but I had a conversation with Danny in February 2011, last year, and I'd just come back from being stood up by a potential investor. And this was someone who is a cafe entrepreneur in this city and has so many cafes and restaurants. And on the surface, you would say that they were a very good potential investor of ours. They had knowledge, enormous amount of knowledge. They had made many, many, many millions in the hospitality scene in this city. And it became evident quite quickly, I guess, that even in the conversation, the way the conversation went, well, the first conversation we had, that we shared very, very different values. Apart from being hit on within about 5 minutes by a married man, I'm like, hang on a second, that I'm partnered, you're partnered, not sure about this. But, I continued the conversation. The second conversation I got stood up on, and I sat in this person's cafe, and they said, oh, can you wait for another 3 hours for me to come back? And I thought, bugger that. No, actually I won't. So I caught the tram back to my office and sat and wrote the principles of how we would choose the kind of people that we wanted to partner with this person in mind very, very strongly, and thinking about, well, what are all the reasons why I wouldn't accept this person? Not just because they've stood me up, but what have I learnt about this process? So we've got 10 principles that I wrote of the sorts of investors that we're looking for. And it's that positive screen. How do we know that they share the same values as us? Are they good communicators? Do they have their own track record of creating social and environmental value? Are they the kind of people who would roll their sleeves up if it came to it? Are they patient with not just their capital, but are they patient themselves? Do they understand that social impact takes time? You know, you can't just click your fingers and this stuff happens, that they're in for the long haul with us sometimes. So those 10 principles, I guess, have really been a guide for myself in seeking out like minds. And so the thing that makes me really excited about the acquisition that we've just done, you know, we're 50% shareholders in these new acquisitions, but those 4 other investors have a strong track record of their own social impact and environmental impact that they're creating. So 3 of the 4 are foundations, and so the profit that we give them and that we're sharing with them as equity investors, so we're paying them a dividend, that's then reinvested back into social and environmental work. So it just feels like even the profit keeps on doing more and more good. So I'd love to think that we can continue to grow and scale our enterprise, continuing to find like-minded investors, and that instead of just accepting money from wherever it comes from, that we're actually really discerning as an organisation and saying, we actually get to say no to some people. We don't have to take money from anywhere, because it's about how much goodness can you get out of a dollar. And that dollar also is the dollar that comes to us in the form of social investment.
Yeah. I think it's empowering to say no to somebody who's got money and you need it, but also scary. But Peter, I mean, you know, your life, both on the other side as well as a, you know, investment banker and in finance, you've kind of seen both ends of it, you know, both on the money side and then on the other side. What's your sense of, as now the social entrepreneur, what's your sense of the investor, and what would your rules be around trying to get investors on board?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's interesting hearing these conversations in the sense that if I thought about it in terms of how many people I'd had to say no to, in a previous life it was very little, and now it's probably also very little, but the quantums of dollars were significantly different. In terms of now, and looking at social enterprise, social business, and looking at raising capital, I mean, the thing I'd say is that I think the best thing with respect to that is to be proactive. And in a number of fronts, this space is absolutely emerging, and there are many more people now looking to invest in blended value business models and, you know, entities creating shared value and all of that sort of stuff. But they're not, I would also say they're not still in abundance. In terms of being proactive, you know, look at who you're developing your business model for. Developing a business model that is about creating a social investment in Australia, an equity model around building property trusts. There's a lot of people out there who generically, or implicitly understand property investment. And if you can talk to them about the fact that, what you're building is something they already know, it just has a spin on it in the sense that, the property trust is, the properties are going to be leased to community organisations. Well, you're already aligned. So I think in terms of looking at, depending on what the sort of business you're going to build, is that, and this doesn't always happen this way, but I think you'll get more runs on the board and traction quicker if you look at, in the very early stages of the development of your social enterprise, who might be my target market with respect to where money comes from. And that's either, the capital investors or, the consumer market.
I mean, we talk about the vested interests of people who are going to invest. Sort of, for me, I probably sit more next to Liz. Most of my businesses have been, people around me. In fact, I think my first business was a partnership with one of my close friends, and although we ended well, we're not really friends anymore. And not because of the business, but I think the business ultimately did create that tension between us. And I guess I want to ask Liz on your experience is much more with, raising it from people you knew, from family and friends. It wasn't foundations, it wasn't companies. What are the dangers there and the positives? I mean, of course, you go to your parents and, you put on your sad face and they can't say no, but
Fortunately, not one of our parents have invested, thank God for that.
Well, that's right.
So that's...
So what is it? What are your rules around that?
What are our rules around it? We try to treat all of our shareholders the same, and we try to treat them all with exactly the same respect as we would treat, a shareholder we didn't know, an institutional or an investor shareholder. We certainly we weren't overly fussy in the initial instances in terms of who it was. And I'm sure there's many of the budding social entrepreneurs in the room are going to find out. To get things kick-started, sometimes you've just got to take the money. But if you keep the pool reasonably tight, like you have, but on a much smaller scale, then you're automatically going to be dealing with people who are going to share your dream. They're going to be enthused by your passion, and they're going to give you money if the fundamentals are solid, if the business plan is decent, and if they buy into not only the fact that you're effectively a startup, but they're also going to buy into your vision. So that pool in itself is actually quite controllable and tight one to manage. Certainly for us at the moment, going through the process of the whole VC thing, we're certainly treating it as a strategic investor search, and ideally we are showcasing with 3 potential investors, and we will only choose one. We can do this now because we are 18 months down, and we sold 130,000 lives, and we've got track record, and we're not just those startup kids, those startup people, I shouldn't say that, those startup people who really don't have any demonstrated background in this particular field. So, we've got the runs on the board, and to get the runs on the board, we had to, take small amounts of money from, a reasonably small pool of people, and work and bootstrap ourselves up to the point that we're at now, which is not without its highs and lows. So ask about bootstrapping sometime and you'll find out all about that. But in terms of...
Clean boots to polished boots, yes.
But it's certainly in terms of access and sources of funds, we were recently asked to go and present at the Asian Development Bank Forum in Manila, where they were running a showcase sort of forum for potential investees and investors for renewable energy projects that are specifically targeted around the alleviation of poverty, because this year is the International Year of Energy for All, according to the UN, so that's nice. So from that, we certainly forged some good contacts, but we were actually asked to go and attend a fairly significant event in Singapore. Now, Singapore is actually shaping up to be a really interesting hub for social investment and social enterprise across Asia. There are an awful lot of funds that are washing their way through Singapore right now, looking for a home and looking for a credible home. So I would encourage people not to necessarily just think about within Melbourne or within Australia, but also to think about wider spheres to source funds, because there is actually quite a lot of movement around on the international scene.
To me, it feels like it's not a matter of the money not being there, in Australia even. If you think about, PAFs, private ancillary funds, there's, there's 1,000 plus PAFs. I think there's $2 billion, invested in PAFs. So that's all money at the moment that's already sitting to be used for cause-related, donating. But I would say that all of that $2 million, it's often sitting on the balance sheets, not being used fully for that cause, for that mission-related work. So, what a PAF is doing every year is giving 5% away in grants, but you've got this enormous corpus that's sitting there often just in all of these other investments. Well, let's start to align that, those pots of money in the kind of mission-related work. So to me, it doesn't feel like it's not that the money's not there. We've got $30 million in CEDAF that the government put out, and a fraction of that's been used. There's been one or two investments in the last year in a $30 million kind of pots of money. So there's money sitting there, but there still feels like this kind of fundamental disconnect between having enough investor, ready social enterprises and having, and the pots of money that are sitting there. So, if I compare having to go to Denmark to get the startup funds for STREAT, in the end of 2008, it's a completely different landscape now. Could I have found a couple $100,000 in Australia? I reckon I could now, because the money is sitting there specifically earmarked for those purposes. So I think the biggest challenge for social entrepreneurs is actually doing the hard work to have a really investable proposition, having done a lot of number crunching and having really strong financials, but also a team that can kind of demonstrate having the capability as an organisation to deliver what you say you can. So for me, it's just about kind of connecting those things that there's masses and masses of would-be social entrepreneurs and masses of money sitting there, more than most, will probably need. It's about how do we kind of bridge those two, I think.
And I think maybe that's exactly where we are at the moment with so many organisations coming up like Social Traders, the Hub, a lot of these intermediaries, excuse me, that I guess are looking to do that. Foresters, a lot of organisations who are starting to bring them together. And I guess that's what's so exciting about the movement now, But from some of the people in the audience, the entrepreneurs or others, any questions you guys have you want to shoot out at the moment? Anyone burning with a question? Up there.
Thank you. Great. Question for Liz. Fantastic concept. I love the fact that it is for profit. Have you thought, I think the device itself is great for camping, etc., and I appreciate that's not what its need is, but is there an opportunity in developing countries to purchase it at, say, double the price and be able to offer that to another individual in a developing country?
Well, thank you for asking.
And it's a great social media activity too.
Thank you very much. We have actually just entered into an agreement with a group who have both a not-for-profit and for-profit arm, and they are going to stock our light online. One of the biggest issues that we have had is that we're a very lean organisation. There's actually only 3 of us who run it. So we don't have the manpower or the capacity to be able to do online. It's not so much the online sales, it's actually the packing up of everything and the mailing out of everything. Jeepers, that takes a long time. So we've actually organised with another group. So the details of all of that will be on our website very soon. And yeah, we're quite looking forward to being able to sell it online, and a large proportion of the money that is made off those online sales is actually going into the, it's called Carbon Communities not-for-profit arm, and they're actually going to be buying our lights with the extra funds or with the profit that they make to take up to, I think their first major project is going to be on the Thai-Burma border, providing light to refugees, Burmese refugees who have crossed the border into Thailand. So that will be the first of the projects that money will be going to. We've also helped a lot of sort of other social entrepreneurs with their projects as well. So we've got a couple of people who are looking at possible campaigns for their specific projects. So one is a housing project in Bangladesh. So go in and build a house for people in Bangladesh, and as part of that, they will install lights for all the families that are actually in the houses, and they'll be using some of our lights to help them with their fundraising via Possible. So there'll be a few things, and as they come up, please feel free to visit our website and keep an eye, or follow probably me on Twitter. I tend to be a little bit more vocal than the people who are actually running our company Twitter account. So thank you.
Possible is a crowdfunding platform like Kickstarter, if you've heard. Possible's an Australian version. So,
oh, sorry, yes.
For those who don't know, definitely check it out. Amazing projects on there. Another question up the top.
Hi. Although most of you haven't been in business for that long, I mean, in relative terms, are there things that even at this short notice you think you would have done differently from hindsight in terms of trying to get cash together to get started?
Who wants to go for that?
I know what I wouldn't do differently. I wouldn't settle for a smaller amount of money just to get the project started. All the time we see so many kind of social entrepreneurs coming and kind of sharing business ideas and stuff with us, but I couldn't stress strongly enough that once you've actually opened your doors and you've started your business and you've got, well, in our case, you've got your clients in your organisation, finding the focus to do all the things that you should have done earlier, like all your proper business planning and all of that stuff, you can never get that time back again. So I know most social entrepreneurs are just so keen to start just, rolling their sleeves up and getting in there. But just plan, you're better to spend an extra year planning and do a bigger ask than open prematurely and be forever chasing your tail. So I reckon we would have gone under in the first 6 months had we not just had asked for a big enough pot of money and then just been able to focus on building. So I would never kind of undercut the ask or kind of settle for whatever you're given and then just try and do something with that. Like I think often that will be the death of the enterprise kind of before you expected it.
Anyone else? And what would you do different?
That's you, isn't it, Nancy? Hi, Nancy. I think, what would I do differently? I mean, in the early stages, we certainly applied the adage that take your forecasts, halve them and halve them again. I probably would have shaved another quarter off again on top of that. I think that we set targets that were slightly too ambitious for us to meet, particularly also given that that we were, effectively the business was starting in Tanzania. It wasn't starting here. So all sorts of things can go wrong in Africa, and pretty much they're going to go wrong. Anything you can think of, and then some extras on top of that. So, yeah. But other than that, I mean, really, we had a solid 6 months of planning, and I can't agree more with the statement that plan and plan again, and even if you think it's all right, give it to somebody else and get them to help you go through it again. The other thing also that I would thoroughly recommend is to have a team and try and build your team quickly. It's a lot easier to get funding if there's more than one of you, and particularly if you've got complementary skills. So I do numbers and money, and Jane does sort of selling and sort of distribution agreements, and Nick does selling and logistics work. So between the three of us, we've sort of got everything covered. But if it's just one person, it's too hard. You'll kill yourself and you won't be able to do it. You've got to be in it for the long haul, and 18, 19 months down the track now, if it had just been Shane doing it on his own or me doing it on my own, we would never have survived. So make it a team effort.
On that too, for me it always feels too that you're not only just trying to build the team, but it's a sequencing issue, because who you need kind of, right at the beginning is actually quite different to who you need 3 years on. And so people who might on paper have the right skill set, might not actually be right for that timing. So to find kind of all of those things to line up, I think can be quite tricky. And when I talk about team, I also talk about board. You know, having the right board as part of your enterprise, obviously, you know, that's one of the first things that your investors want to look at. Who are the people that are you know, in charge of this organisation ultimately? But when you're building an enterprise and you know you want investment, you know, it's that board. It doesn't matter how good you might think your enterprise is, it's that board that needed to go on the journey with you as well. So to give you a sense, you know, we got our first investment, you know, in March this year, but the conversations about becoming investor ready and educating our board about what it would mean to take on social investment started in November 2010. So that's, you know, that's a 1.5 year process of getting ourselves comfortable with thinking about what it would mean, doing the modelling to try and wrap our heads around it, understanding risk. You know, what risk do you take as a board? You know, your boards are probably going to be made up of a bunch of non-profit people and for-profit people who often see the world in really, really fundamentally different ways. And it's good. They bring, you know, complementary kind of views but trying to get that group of people to all be comfortable with the same amount of risk when you go into this new environment of taking money and having to repay that money can be absolutely terrifying for people who haven't done that. So kind of taking, you know, as the entrepreneur, you're actually taking this whole team of people with you, and that process can sometimes be a really long one. So kind of making sure that everyone's kind of there at the same pace with you, I think, is really critical.
I think from our point of view, looking at Buffed, you know, the question I think was, you know, what might be the learnings in terms of capital. I'm not sure that that's where our learnings have been, or what we would do differently. I think from our point of view, that's been actually it's been a pretty good fit, and it might be because of I guess our those involved in the organisation and our backgrounds that sort of works. From my perspective, I've never had any experience in retail, yet we're essentially developing a retail service business. My learning would be that I would have gone and got someone on board in the organisation, either employed or you know, I guess working with us to ensure that what we were developing had a real strong focus on retail service. Investment bankers aren't good at retail service, so you know, it's so that would we're constantly learning, and one of the other comments was making sure that, you know, that you're having the right people. For us, the right people is our franchisees, but our absolute priority focus moving forward is the training and development. So our learning also now with respect to that is making sure that, you know, that we've got the right the right people involved in the organisation. To ensure that is the focus. On the question of capital, and if I look at it in terms of you know, prior ventures, initiatives and enterprises and so forth, I'd get back to that point before I made in terms of being proactive. Don't go and do all of the work and all of the necessary work, and then with your IM or with your business plan, go and speak to an investor and say, hey, I want X. Go and talk to them 3 months beforehand. Go and talk to them the first time you put pen to paper and say, this is what I'm looking to do. This is what I'm going to go and do. You might find that, well, I would suggest that most of them would absolutely prefer that approach. They're, like your directors, you know, they're part of that journey then. They might want to roll the sleeves up, not in terms of getting involved in operationally, but in terms of being, you know, I guess providing advice in terms of what it is that they're going to want to see in 3 months' time. So in terms of being proactive, if you're looking for capital and you know that your organisation or the social enterprise that you're looking to build is going to need capital in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, have the conversation now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that point is really important because I guess even as an investor, once you're, I guess, emotionally invested in supporting an enterprise before they've ever asked you for money, by the time they get to asking for money, you're too close to say no. So it's very clever to get in as early as you can with them. We had another question here.
Thank you all. It's been very enlightening, all the insights you have in regards to the investment process from social entrepreneurship. Let me preface my question by saying that it seems there's a lot of social entrepreneurs out there who come with this social change vision that they have and then find a business that they can support that with. And then a lot of larger businesses that are hoping to add corporate social responsibility to their business to create some buzz and remove the negative PR. are there practices that you have regularly done so in order to balance your social vision for the future along with making your product, viable for an investor?
I'll start with that one. What we've done is we've actually embedded our social values so deeply that just one sale of our product makes such a significant difference to people that we don't even have to think about it. So by sort of making it so integral to our entire business structure and everything that we do, we tend to think of ourselves as business entrepreneurs rather than social entrepreneurs, because it just naturally and automatically falls out of everything that we do. What we find is that we periodically actually have to sit back and go, yeah, actually we have made a difference. And so, me producing monthly numbers of, this is how many thousand tonnes of carbon we've abated so far and that sort of thing, is actually for us the reminder about the things that we do, because it's not so much in our face as certainly STREAT and Buffed. But I'm interested that you mentioned CSR, because we've actually started some CSR, and it kind of comes back to your issue around who to take money from, and in this case for us it's who do we have as customers. We have had a number of approaches around corporate, people wanting lights for corporate social responsibility purposes, because we can colour our lights and we can put brands on them, and we're happy to do all of that. That's not a problem as long as the order's large enough. Hint, hint. BHP, maybe no. But we've had some tentative approaches from organisations that, frankly, there's no way that we could ever, let our product be associated with them, and so it feels like they're trying to use us to greenwash themselves a bit, and so and I don't know what the new term for social entrepreneurial or social impact washing themselves is.
I call it swashing.
Swashing,
Yeah,
Social washing.
I've always got sea washing. Yeah.
Oh,
they're all good. So
Swashing.
So that's a bit of a challenge for us, because we're a product-based organisation. So I hope that answers. Did you guys have any comments on that?
I don't know whether it answers the question, but if you talk about corporates and CSR, actually I think that's, without question, the biggest opportunity to take that quantum leap in terms of, what's the overall social impact. And there's an enormous amount of work, obviously, and an emergence in terms of social enterprise. And I think it happens in any industry, irregardless. As you see industry emerge, you've got those, those real critical thinkers, those thought leaders that just roll the sleeves up and go and get it done. They're willing to take the risk, they're willing to take, all of that. And then through proof of concept, through seeing those things work, through seeing, the mass consumer market look at, how they adopt, those businesses. Look at, the environmental movement over the last 15 years. If you look at, fair trade and all those sorts of things, then, it's as those things start to gain traction and they start to build a consumer market, then the corporate organisations and the larger organisations are then saying, well, there's our consumer market. We need to change the way we do business, or improve the way we do business, to ensure that we're not missing out on that. And I actually think that the more we can get the larger corporates to be really proactively focused on that, that social responsibility that ensures that they're creating that shared value and in terms of the way that they're operating. That to me, I think, is the. And there's some really interesting stuff being done offshore. If a lot of people no doubt familiar with the B Corp model and what they're doing in relation to looking at any organisation, whether you're a retail organisation or a service-driven business or a professional accounting, or professional services firm, it really doesn't matter. You can be independently audited in terms of, what is the, what's your view with respect to the way you're operating? Is it just being primarily economically focused, or is it taking into consideration in everything you do the social impacts and the environmental impacts that you're creating?
It'd be lovely to see a bunch of kind of social enterprise and corporate joint ventures in the future, a bit similar to what Grameen Danone have, where you've got two companies or organisations coming together and creating this new entity, which is a very hybrid organisation. But I'd love to see the first kind of joint ventures like that in Australia between big corporates, and I think that really is the next step beyond CSR, where we're actually creating new hybrid forms together and doing business together rather than it being kind of at arm's length or swashing or greenwashing.
When you've got so many investors or investors that are interested, and you get to a point where you have to, or should be, as you said with STREAT, discerning with your investors in terms of not burning bridges. And you never know when companies change, and you might one day say yes to their investment. How do you go about telling these interested investors no, whether it be because they're not aligned, or as you say, you'll never ever want to do business with them? How do you go about saying no? Do you have a policy of honesty so that they can reflect on how they can participate in a more welcoming way? Or I'd just be interested to know.
Very carefully is the way, I would say. I always kind of take it as a mark. I guess the two conversations that I've had with the organisations that offered us gambling money, and it's worth saying that it was going to be a substantial amount of money over time. So it can be really hard to say to someone, no, we don't want your money because we don't think it's come from the right place. Particularly if that organisation has come to you because it wants to make a social difference. And genuinely that that's what it's about. And in this case, I guess, in the two cases, I sat down with the organisations that were talking about, or that were offering the money, and talked to them about the issue of homelessness, how gambling played such a big issue in homelessness, but talked about other ways that we might work together. So, as some of these places are a big employer of young people over time, that there might be other positive ways that we could kind of work together. So for me, it was never kind of closing a door, but it was about saying, here's what we believe, and being really transparent about that. Just here's the different principles upon which we make the decision. And it's hard for that not to sound judgmental, I guess, in a way, but kind of always prefer to say about the things that, the principles, how we've chosen, the aspirations, I guess. It's about talking about the aspirations rather than kind of all of the negatives. That's kind of the approach I've taken.
I found that in Australia, the landscape here is a bit more challenging to raise funding, but particularly, and then again, I've come tonight because I'm interested in the social enterprise sector. But who like you've mentioned Possible, Hub Melbourne, but are there any distinct other bodies that are dedicated to social enterprise funding? Like, what options are really out there? Because you've mentioned that there's a few that have come up recently, but I'm trying to find, like, are there any distinct angel bodies? Like, is social enterprise even registering for VCs here? Like, what have you guys found out there?
There's the flurry of stuff that was set up out of CEDAF, so Social Investment Australia, SVA, Social Ventures Australia's new Social Impact Fund.
Although I will say, though, that a lot of those funds do actually require that you're a not-for-profit or a charity. So their definitions around social enterprise are actually quite small. So, it's one of these things where sometimes you may have to cut, sort of choose, I was going to say cut your cloth to make your suit, but, you may have to actually choose what sort of structure you want to have based on what type of funding you want or that you have access to. So, we never did it that way. We decided from the off that we were going to be a business, and that's what we were about. So that automatically discounted us from a significant amount of funding. But, I mean, there has been some stuff that's come out of CETA, but I'm just adding, sorry, I just wanted to add that in so that anybody who's thinking about a lot of these things, have a think about your structure before you make any, have conversations with people before you commit to structure.
Yeah, I would agree with that entirely. I mean, we spent quite a lot of time at the beginning of building STREAT to get DGR charitable status, and also we're a public benevolent institution, which meant that we had access to a whole bunch of philanthropic money and also some government grants. So, we knew that there were going to be many, many years of being reliant on granting before we were completely financially sustainable. So, yes, the business grows every year, but there's still a big hole every year that I've got to fill through our non-business revenue, and it was going to be a number of years until we could get social investment. So, if you've got a hole and that big deficit every year, how are you filling that deficit? And for most social enterprises, it's probably going to traditionally be granting that you're relying on, but you can only tap into most of that granting if you've got DGR status. So for us, it was about making sure that we worked with really good lawyers to make sure our constitution was written the right way, that the constitution gave us the best chance of getting DGR, and getting that DGR really early and then opening up those philanthropic pots. But I don't think we could have done it any other way. I don't think we could have done it the way that you guys did it. And by the time, we hit financial sustainability, the dozens and dozens and dozens of philanthropic grants we will have got that will have made us get to that end point to make it possible, are extraordinary. There's a very big gap that has to be filled every year, and our philanthropists make it a huge difference to kind of getting us to that point.
But I think, Danny, you could probably answer the rest of that question, because
Yeah,
there's social traders and there's you.
Social enterprise.
And who else is there?
The Social Enterprise Finance Australia, Foresters Community Finance, Social Investment Australia. There's Social Ventures Australia, SVA, SFA. It's small giants, but I mean, the other thing is that there's some interesting stuff, I would say, that is certainly emerging in terms of where there are people who, or organisations, family offices, all the rest of it, who have got an intended view, if you like, whether it be towards disability or whether it be towards Indigenous, or whether it be, and there's been, I guess, the early stage or environmental, but there has been the early stage development of almost private investment vehicles, if you like, which will look to take on external capital, specifically looking at the development of initiatives, ventures, businesses that are targeted to a specific cause, because that's the nature of who's starting them. So they're all very much, I guess I would say, early stage, but it's interesting if you look at what's happening offshore, and someone mentioned Singapore before. I think where we're headed with respect to looking at in impact investment, social investment. In Singapore, for example, they're just starting the Asia IIX, which is essentially looking at the development of a stock exchange purely to, I guess, finance or to provide capital for social enterprises. Now, that's really exciting for a whole range of reasons, because it's not just another investment fund. It's not just someone making a direct investment. It's actually creating a market. And I think that the more work that's collectively done in and around this country on the development of the market, the sooner we'll get to, more capital, more investor interest, more accountability, and reporting and all the rest of it. So you can look at it and say, I'm investing in that company or not that company, and this is why. So is it about return? Is it about economic return versus social return? Am I happy to take a discount because of a heightened social return? There's a whole lot of stuff that's happening in that space, which is really, really, and the Rockefeller Foundation and a few others in the States. There's a group over there called GIN, which is the Global Impact Investment Network, and some of the stuff they're doing is amazing. So
there's talk about setting up an Australian social stock exchange as well. So Donkey Wheel Foundation, who's represented here tonight, they're absolutely having conversations with the Bendigo Stock Exchange. Could you turn the Bendigo Stock Exchange into an Australian social stock exchange? So there's really interesting conversations which are all critical, because one of the big problems we've got at the moment is because there's so few of us that have got kind of impact investment, I guess, that there's no liquidity in the market. It's a bit of a one-way kind of stream at the moment, that you can put your money in, but how do you get your money out easily?
Yeah,
Fortunately, we've found, some fantastic, investors who are prepared to come on what will probably be a fairly lengthy journey of, 5 years, probably minimum. But how do we create an environment where you could put in, $100, or someone else could put in a smaller amount of money, but that money can come in and out as you need it? So I think we've still got quite a long way to go before we've got enough players at the right level, enough regulation and the structures to kind of be there to match what needs to happen. But at the moment, we're still relying on, people who, like Danny and others who come along for the journey with us and know that they're very much partners in that, and that we're kind of co-developing how we work together, because the structure just isn't there. So, when I have a conversation 2 years ago with Danny and say, hey, hypothetically, if you were to be an investor with us longer term, what would you want? Well, Danny's saying, actually, I don't want to give you a loan. I'd like it to be equity. Us going away and scratching our heads for a year and going, okay, how would that work? It's those conversations that kind of help form it. But we've still got a lot of structuring and gap filling, don't we, before, you can kind of trade easily with each other and buy in and out.
And I think one of the key things I take from that is, you say it took you a year. Well, the reality is it just takes that long the first time you do it. Setting up, Buffed as a social franchise, it took months. What we've been mindful of what we're doing now is that we've now got a senior research fellow spending 1 day a week in our office to essentially map every conceivable thing that gets done, so that in 12 months, 2 years, 3 years, we're not looking back retrospectively at the development of Buffed and saying, well, we achieved some level of success, whatever that may be, but how did we get there? We're actually mapping it the way through, because the reality is we don't want the next person to take as long to build a social franchise, or we don't want the next organisation to take 12 months to come up with this proposed new structure as to how to, position themselves to be, recipients of, that investor capital that's sitting at the door, but you need to be massaged in the right way to come in. So in that sense, I think as we see more and more organisations develop, achieve success, and God forbid failure, which is destined to happen, but that we learn from those, and that we get quicker with respect to the next organisation in terms of how it's positioned, how it's grown, how we look to get that capital in the door and continue to grow.
Yeah, actually, I might just add to that. One of the key things, one of the key issues for sort of this social enterprise sector is, what is the exit strategy for your shareholders? Seriously, what are you going to do? Unless you as an organisation have got sufficient funds to actually buy them out when they want to leave, or to find them an alternate shareholder, there's actually no way that they can get out of the business. And what happens if you as the founders want to leave the business? Because you become so wrapped up, invested within its structures, it's actually quite a difficult thing to move on from. So the creation of things like these various different exchanges will actually be pretty critical, because it will provide potential investors in this sector with a very, very clear way of exiting their funds as and when they feel that they need to. So it actually becomes a win-win situation for everybody if we can get these sorts of things off the ground.
Great question. Obviously, there's a lot of conversation there. I think the key is, right now, we're at a place where I think commercial investors are starting in Australia. It's still early days, but it's just starting. So, I mean, for everyone who sort of said, you're in this space now, I think it's a really, really perfect time to be here, rather than when Beck started and had to go to Denmark to find it. We've got time for one more question. We've already got a mic over there.
My question is more specific to you personally. How has it affected your lives from day to day, and with your families and friends and co-workers and such?
So how's it affected you personally is the question in your own lives?
You live and breathe these things. You'd never ever switch off. It's all consuming. If you could give yourself, give your kidneys and your body organs to your enterprise, you would. I'm not sure if any social entrepreneurs have sold their body parts yet. People have done it for iPad, so maybe they've done it for their social enterprises. I don't know. It's the most exhilarating, petrifying journey that you'll ever go on, the most rewarding thing that you'll ever do probably. It makes you go grey than you ever thought you'd go grey fast, but there's nothing, I think, like finding a point where that, I guess where you get to see your customers up close and you get to see, the social change up close, and you can actually see that those two things have a direct correlation. So when it works, it's the most extraordinary thing to witness, and I wouldn't be anywhere else on the planet doing anything else.
I'd have to agree. There you go. That's short and sweet. I'd have to agree. It's just the same as running a small business, a business. There's no different. But the rewards are triple what they would be if you were selling shoes, for example. The feel-good benefit is out of this world. It's like a drug, actually. It's great.
In terms of personal, what it means personally. In the corporate sector, I work like a dog, and what I'm doing now, I work long hours. But the interesting thing is, I'd say I'd never do anything I don't enjoy doing, regardless. The interesting thing with respect to that, though, is that in a corporate sense, a deal's done and, you walk away and you're looking for the next transaction, if you like. I give you really, and I see these all the time now, which I'm very fortunate to be in this position. As of 4:30 this afternoon, before I madly rushed from one end of Collins Street to come here, I had set up a shoe shine franchise in 530 Collins Street. And the guy that we've been right through the training with him, and his name is Danny. I hope you'll get to know him. He has been in Australia for, and I'll tell you exactly, 1 year, 3 months and 22 days, because he knew exactly how many days he started. When he started his business today, how many days he'd been in Australia. Prior to that, he'd been in a refugee camp for 22 years. So I look at it and I say, well, for me, am I going to go back in the corporate world and look for the next transaction, or am I going to look at, how can I open as many of these damn franchisees as we possibly can, so that people like him can, benefit from the experience. So you work hard, all the rest of it, but at the end of the day, it is incredibly rewarding. So
I want to ask one last question, a really quick one, and if you can keep it to 1 or 2 sentence answer, because we've been talking about finding money and raising money, but if you had $100,000 in your pocket, which social enterprise, if you weren't allowed to give it to your own, what would you be looking for? Is there anything currently that you'd be thinking like, that's just got to get investment? Anything you've seen out there that you'd love to get that burning 100K wad of cash into right now?
In terms of I wear a few hats, and some of the things we're doing outside of Buffed, I throw it in there immediately, and they're for profit, but they're absolutely social enterprises, and to be quite frank, they're not. You wouldn't look at it and go, wow, that's a completely new business, but it is in the sense of taking a very much a social view to existing models that are currently out there. So
you'd be in the innovation space. Beck?
I'm really passionate about how we take the collective knowledge that we've got and we actually train up another generation of social entrepreneurs who don't have to take as long to do the things that we've done, because there just haven't been the rule books there. So the Donkey Wheel Foundation is developing the Difference Incubator, which is essentially an incubator for social innovators. So I would be really passionate about saying, let's teach the stuff that we've learned and have a whole other bunch of people be able to do this stuff faster. So I think I'd be giving it to the incubator.
Cool. Liz?
Damn, stole me. I was going to mention Donkey Wheel incubator as well.
Just raised 200 grand, well done.
Yeah, they have actually, good on them. Possibly also SSE. I think that they're doing some pretty good stuff. Look, there's a few bits and pieces around. I'd probably split the money up. There's some interesting things that are being done around refugee camps at the moment. So I'd probably look at some social enterprise models associated with those. So, yeah.
Well, if everyone would join me in thanking our panellists, Peter, Rebecca and Liz.